So Leigh Whannell is now known for directing two remakes of classic monster films from Universal Studios. He did a great job with the Invisible Man remake. Did he do the same thing with Wolfman? Find out in this review. Hey guys, this is Jason. I'm reviewing Wolfman, directed by Leigh Whannell, and it is a new take on the Wolfman story after the Lon Chaney Jr. film from 1941 and the Benicio del Toro remake from 2010. In this film, Blake, played by Christopher Abbott, takes his family to the woods in Oregon to take care of his father's home, but are attacked by an unseen animal. And after they barricade themselves inside this house from this thing, unfortunately they realize that the dad got scratched by this thing and starts to slowly transform into something unrecognizable. This is another remake of one of Universal's classic monster movies, besides The Invisible Man, which we got a few years ago, which was also directed by Leigh Whannell. And this film decides to go in a different route with the Wolfman story, where instead of it being a curse, which it usually is in werewolf movies, this time in this film, it's an infection. I was pretty excited to see this film because I am a fan of Leigh Whannell's work, whether he's written horror films like Saw and Insidious, or directed movies like Upgrade, The Invisible Man, and Insidious Chapter 3. For those films alone, I was pretty excited to see his take on the Wolfman story, and did he manage to make this film as good as those films? Not quite. Now, this isn't a bad movie. I didn't think that this is a terrible movie, but I wouldn't say it's as good as his Invisible Man film. There are some things in this film that I liked, and some things in this film that I did not like, so let's talk about the stuff that I liked first. I do like the setup for the characters that are introduced, where you learn more about some of their backstories and what made them who they are now, and you do get to learn a little bit about this werewolf disease that's happening in this forest, but you don't get to learn a whole lot, but you really just get the idea that this house that this family is going to in Oregon is not really safe. And that definitely builds up for some of the tension throughout the film, where you do get to care about the main dad in the film, where he's trying to take care of his family, but at the same time, he's slowly transforming into a monster. I thought the acting was pretty solid. I like Christopher Abbott as the main character, Blake. He starts out as a nice, normal dad when he's trying to take care of his daughter, and he's there for her a lot, but after he gets scratched by this wolf creature and he starts slowly becoming a wolf creature, he starts to show less emotion and starts to look more terrifying as he changes. And I thought Christopher Abbott did a pretty good job as the main character, where you do buy into him as a character that's trying to be a good father, but is also trying to stay away from his family while he's becoming a werewolf. I thought Julia Garner was fine in the film. There were times where I thought she did a good job, but there are also times where she didn't really show a lot of fear on her face when she's supposed to be terrified, because when she starts seeing him slowly change and he's losing his teeth and his hair and he's doing something to his arm, she doesn't really show a lot of concern or fear on her face when that happens. But overall, Julia Garner was fine in the film. There were times where I thought she did a good job, but there were also times where I was like, shouldn't you be afraid of what's happening to your husband right now? I also gotta give major kudos for the atmosphere in this film, where when we get to the nighttime scenes outside, they definitely give you the feeling of fear and dread that there's something out there around this house. That's definitely one of the biggest praises I will give this film, the atmosphere giving you the feeling of dread and fear. I also like that they use some practical effects on Blake when he's slowly changing into this wolf creature, where they use some real makeup and practical effects. It's definitely very Fly and The Thing-like, which Leigh Whannell has mentioned that this is supposed to be a love letter to some of the classic horror films like John Carpenter's The Thing and David Cronenberg's The Fly. And you can definitely see those similarities when you see him slowly changing like Jeff Goldblum did in The Fly, and you get the creepy atmosphere like you did in John Carpenter's The Thing, where you get the feeling that this family is isolated in one location and there's this unknown creature that's roaming happening around them. Another thing I gotta give major props for is the sound design. When we see Blake slowly changing, we also get to hear what he's hearing, where he starts to hear some other things that no other human can hear, and he can't understand what his wife and daughter are saying when they're talking to him. And that's definitely one of the coolest things I will say for this film. Whenever we see and hear from his perspective, it's a completely different perspective when he starts to hear gibberish from his wife and daughter and hearing loud noises from outside their house. Now, a lot of the stuff that I just mentioned about this film definitely make the film watchable, and they are some of the best parts of the film, but the story and the characters definitely needed a lot of work, because this movie shows this family dynamic and sets up some of their backstories for the film, but you don't really get to see much of how their backstories are fleshed out, where you get to see them deal with issues that they are having problems going through, but you don't really get to learn much about those issues that they're dealing with. Like, there's this one subplot involving Blake and his wife Charlotte. It's showing that they're having some issues with their marriage, and they're trying to rekindle that love by going on this trip to this house. But you don't really get to learn much about why they're having issues. It's just mentioned in this one scene, and they never bring it up again ever after that. There's also this other subplot between Blake and this other character that he's had problems with in the past in his childhood, but you don't really get to learn much about that. And it's supposed to be like a big part of this theme that Leigh is going for with this film, where Blake is trying to be a better father for his daughter, and he's trying to not make the same mistakes that this other person he knew did. So he's trying to do some things that are supposed to be better than what that person did, but he's also slowly turning into a monster, so there's that problem. It's just that those subplots with both Blake, his wife, and this other person, I feel like they were missing some more character development, and that's kind of disappointing because we're supposed to care about this family, but we really don't know much about them like we should have. I think this movie needed a lot more character development, because when some of the werewolf stuff was going on and you're supposed to feel emotional for this family throughout the film, I unfortunately didn't care, because I didn't get much about who they were as characters, unfortunately. And there are unfortunately some moments when characters make some stupid decisions, like one scene involving a truck or another scene involving a car door, and that does unfortunately happen a couple of times in the film. I mean, not a whole lot, but there are a couple of times where I'm like, what are you doing? That's not a very smart idea. And here's the part that you guys have probably been wanting me to talk about for this film, and that is the werewolf design for when Blake is in his full werewolf form, because that is the big part with these werewolf films, where you get to see the main character transform into a werewolf. And of course it's done differently here, where instead of the full moon being out and he fully transforms into a werewolf, it's a slow transformation throughout the whole night. And with this design for the werewolf that they went with, I am mixed on it, because there were times where I thought it did look creepy like it was supposed to, but then there were times where it didn't look that much like a werewolf and it looked more like a zombie, which I get this is supposed to be a different take on a werewolf transformation and look, but this design that they went with, I don't know if it really worked for me, even though there were times where I thought it looked creepy, but there were also times where it looked a little weird. I mean, it looked better than the one that they showed at Universal Studios at their Halloween Horror Nights. Wolfman, directed by Leigh Whannell, turned out to be an okay werewolf movie where it had some good ideas, and it still got away with some redeeming qualities, but it still suffers from a pretty basic story, characters that don't have a lot of development, sometimes those characters make terrible and stupid decisions, and a werewolf design that is a little questionable. And even though I still enjoyed this film for what it was, I was still disappointed that this is not another great film from Leigh Whannell, and even though I obviously like The Invisible Man more than this, I still think that this film is watchable. I'm gonna give Wolfman 2025 a C+. So guys, if you have seen Leigh Whannell's Wolfman, what did you think about it? Do you think it's a great movie and it's a great take on the Wolfman story, or do you think that this film did a terrible job at it? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like this video, then please leave a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a thing, because it helps my channel grow. Hit the notification bell so you know what other videos I'm posting. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.